shared solar, which we've been hearing from some municipalities is becoming a more popular, and there's certainly growing interest in it, and so we wanted to cover some basics in case people get questions or want to try to engage in this themselves. So we're going to be presenting the webinar today will be Mike Judge, who is from our Renewable Energy Division, and Emma Kraus from the Green Communities Division will be sharing the presentation. Before we get started, just want to point out some things about the Green Communities Division, if you are not already aware of it. We do serve all 351 cities and towns in the state, in addition, including the 136 official green communities that have achieved green community status, but basically can help cities and towns with any and all energy matters, and that including municipalities that are served by municipal light plants. We have got 4 Green Communities regional coordinators who can help you with all of that. If you don't already know who they are situated in 4 places in the state, in the DEP regional offices. Please take down their contact information, and they can help you to navigate whatever energy issue you happen to have. Do also take down the email address at the bottom and the address of our website. We do have a lot of interesting activities and updates and new offerings that come up from time to time, and this will help you to keep abreast of all of that. Especially sign up for our e-blast, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. We put those out every couple of weeks with kind of the latest and greatest of what is going on. We do have a couple of things that are happening soon that I can tell you about today. The request for information that we put out a while ago on looking for municipalities to comment on the 3-year plans, 3-year efficiency plans of the utilities that are currently undergoing revision. That deadline is 5 o'clock on Friday, so if you haven't already commented and you would like to, you can find that on our website. Also, we have a couple of upcoming webinars. On March 11th, we'll have one on the utility program's Efficient Neighborhoods Plus program, and on April 9th, we'll have one on establishing your energy baseline, which is good preparation for any municipalities that are considering applying for green community status in our October 2015 designation round. We are going to be recording the presentation today, as always. The recording and the audio, the audio and the slides will both be posted on our website within about 48 hours. We will also take questions during the presentation. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can type in some questions. We'll answer as many as we can during the webinar, and then at the end we will we'll do a full Q&A that we'll post on our website within a couple of weeks. Also, you'll notice in the right-hand top right corner of your screen, there is a little camera icon. If there are any slides that come up, there's a lot of information, especially in this webinar, that may be sort of new, unfamiliar, a little complex. If there's anything you want to not have to write down and just save for later reference, you can click that icon and you'll be able to save that slide for your future reference. And we have websites with more information that will be listed at the end, as well as our contact information. So I'm going to just launch into this with a poll question first. We have a couple of poll questions during the presentation, but we'd like to know who is in the audience today. Are you a municipality or another public entity? Are you a solar developer, a nonprofit organization, or a homeowner? And I'm going to turn it over to Charlie Tuttle from the Green Communities Division, who's our technical expert today, and he's going to give you a few minutes, or a few seconds rather, to answer that, and then he'll announce the results.
Okay, with about 65% of the folks out there voting, we've got 50% municipalities, 30% solar developers, 9% nonprofits, 9% homeowners interested in solar.
Okay, that's a pretty diverse group. So with that, we will get into the meat of the webinar. And I'm going to turn it over first to Mike Judge, and take it away, Mike.
Great, thanks, Lisa. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about just the overall solar market and our newish regulations on the Solar Carve-Out 2 program and how community shared solar fits into that. So just to give you a little background, the solar market in Massachusetts has grown pretty dramatically over the last 8 years or so, from about 3 megawatts at the beginning of 2007 to well over 750 megawatts today. Market has been, in that country, it's supported by a number of different incentive programs, but the primary driver has been the solar carve-out programs. Phase 1 was the SREC 1 program, which ended in April 2014 and ended up supporting about 650 megawatts of solar. Phase 2 is the SREC 2 program, which began just after the SREC 1 program ended and will help drive the market to 1,600 megawatts of solar by 2020. So the SREC 2 market is really designed to continue sustaining market growth, but really focuses the policy effort to direct market development to residential projects, commercial rooftops, solar parking canopies, projects on landfills or brownfields, low income, or community shared solar. So really trying to maximize the benefits to those particular sectors and drive development to the areas where it makes the most sense from a public policy and land use development standpoint. And as a result of these regulations, and actually somewhat prior to them, interest in residential direct ownership and community shared solar has significantly grown throughout the Commonwealth. So that brings us to the question of what exactly is community shared solar. So community shared solar is when a homeowner or a business owner or anyone really wants to install solar on their roof, but can't do that because of site constraints. Maybe they have shading or an improper orientation, or the roof isn't suitable to install solar. But what community shared solar allows for is it allows the homeowner or whoever would like to participate in a solar project that's located in a different place other than their electric load, and still receive the energy benefits from that solar. So there's a number of basic roles for any community shared solar project. So you have the site owner, who actually owns the site that the project is located on. You have the vendor, who develops and administers the actual project and makes sure that all of the credits that are being generated by it are distributed to the appropriate individuals. You have participants who are actually purchasing the energy or net metering credits from the project, or have some ownership stake in the project. And then you have the system owner, who actually owns the PV system. So sometimes these parties can be one and the same. Sometimes they're all very different. So there are a number of opportunities in Massachusetts supporting community shared solar. One is the Solar Renewable Energy Credits or Certificate Program, SREC program, which has a specific category for community shared solar. Another is virtual net metering, which is very essential to community shared solar, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in a second. And then additionally, DOER has put out resources explaining community shared solar models and is available to help support communities or developers in their efforts to push forward community shared solar projects. So I won't read this definition in detail, but this is the definition of community shared solar from our regulations. So community shared solar can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but when we were creating a specific category for it in the SREC 2 program, we really wanted to limit it to situations where you have lots of small off-takers participating in the project. So this definition provides substantial flexibility on the ownership role of participants, and also allows for anchor off-takers. So you have to have at least 3 utility accounts that are participating, and no more than 2 of those accounts can take 50% of the output of a project. So if you had a 1 megawatt facility, you could have one off-taker that takes 500 kilowatts, and they act as an anchor tenant, help the project get financed, but you'd have to have at least 20 other off-takers that are taking less than 25 kilowatts or less of the overall output of that 1 megawatt facility. So really focusing it on small off-takers, homeowners, small businesses, and the like. As I mentioned earlier, the SREC 2 program is really designed to support particular types of projects over others, and there are 4 different market sectors that have been established, so market sectors A, B, C, and managed growth. And depending on which sector you're in, you can generate more SRECs per megawatt hour than other sectors. So if you're in market sector A, you get 1 SREC for every megawatt hour you generate. Market sector B, 0.9 SRECs for every megawatt hour. Market sector C, 0.8, and managed growth, 0.7. So really, you're not getting less valuable SRECs, you're just getting less SRECs. And as you can see here, market sector A is really geared towards very small projects, so projects less than 25 kilowatts, solar parking canopies, emergency power facilities that can provide emergency power in an emergency situation, community shared solar, and lower moderate income. And then in market sectors B and C, you see building mounted or projects that are sited behind an existing load or on a landfill or brownfield, really trying to steer development away from open spaces and forested land and encourage it in places where it makes the most sense from a policy standpoint. So the other really important part of all of this, besides the SRECs, is net metering. And I think this is actually probably more important as far as community shared solar, because we did have community shared solar projects before SREC 2, and that's because of our net metering policies in Massachusetts. And net metering is, at its core, an incentive program designed to encourage customers to install distributed generation. So you offset your own electricity usage, and you're compensated for any electricity that you generate but don't end up using. So if your consumption exceeds generation in a particular month, you pay for the kilowatt hours that you use. If your generation exceeds consumption, then you receive a credit on your bill for excess generation. So most non-residential and municipal solar projects depend on net metering credits along with the SREC revenue. And any really, generally speaking, any really large ground-mounted solar array that you see in a field or on a landfill or on a brownfield is providing net metering credits to some off-taker somewhere. And Massachusetts market is non-uniform in the availability of and value of net metering credits. So the amount of net metering, amount of megawatts that can be net metered in any particular utility service territory differs based upon how big that utility is and how much electric load they serve. And over the past 6 years, the legislature has raised net metering caps multiple times. Currently, they're set at 5% for public and 4% for private, and that percentage is based on the historical peak load of that particular utility. So if the utility served 10,000 megawatt hours at its, or 10,000 megawatts at its absolute historical peak, 5% of that would have to be eligible for net metering. So just some eligibility criteria. To be eligible, you need to have some on-site load that can be parasitic. So you can be, as long as you're grid connected, that you should satisfy that eligibility requirement. You have to be located on in an investor-owned utility service territory. So the investor-owned utilities are, there's 4 of them in Massachusetts. So you have National Grid, Eversource, which is NSTAR and Western Mass Electric, and Unitil. You have a capacity of less than 2 megawatts AC for private facilities or less than 10 megawatts for public facilities. And public is defined as having a public entity as the host customer for the utility account and receiving 100% of the net metering credits. You have to also be a PV, wind, or anaerobic digestion or agricultural generation unit. And then there's 3 classes of net metering facilities in Massachusetts. Class 1 is less than or equal to 60 kilowatts. Class 2 is 60 kilowatts to 1 megawatt. And then Class 3 is 1 megawatt to 2 megawatt. And I'll explain where there's a little bit of differential on the Class 3 value of credits in a second. So as far as credits are concerned, the generation is tracked on a utility meter in kilowatt hours, but the credits are actually expressed as a monetary value. So you generate excess kilowatt hours, and then you receive on your bill a dollar credit. You don't actually see how many kilowatt hours went into calculating that credit. You just see a dollar value subtracted off of your bill. Credits offset charges on electricity bills, and they never expire, so they can be carried forward indefinitely until you use them. They can be cashed out at the discretion of the distribution company for projects larger than a megawatt, but very rarely are. So usually these credits just accrue on your bill until you use them. The value of the credits is very close to the retail rate, so it includes most of the main charges that you see on your electric bill. So it includes the distribution charge, transmission charge, transition charge, and basic service charge for all facilities except for Class 3 private facilities, which do not receive the distribution charge. So if you're between 1 megawatt and 2 megawatt in a private net metered facility, meaning you don't provide 100% of your outtake to a public entity, then you do not get the value of the distribution credit in your net metering credit calculation. So normally the credits accrue on the utility account located where the project is, but you can allocate those credits virtually to other accounts. So they can be allocated to any account located, utility account located in the same service territory and ICE and New England load zone. And I'll explain that in just a second. And credits are allocated on a percentage basis. So if you have a 1 megawatt facility, you can allocate 50% to one person, 20% to another person, 30% to another. But you can allocate that to as many accounts as you would like. Allocation is done via a form referred to as Schedule Z and can be changed twice per year. And then payment for the credits is not dealt with by the utility. The utility only provides the credit on, just moves money around on people's bills, but the actual payment is negotiated between the credit owner, so the project owner, the entity that owns the net metering credits initially, and the entity that's taking the credits, or as the off-taker, via a net metering credit purchase agreement. So you enter into an agreement with the solar developer, and you purchase the net metering credits from them at an arranged price. As I mentioned before, credits can be allocated across fairly wide areas, so as long as you're in the same utility service territory, you and ICE and New England load zone, which are demarcated here by the dotted lines, you can allocate credits. So this shows credit being allocated from North Adams all the way out almost to Worcester, I think, and then from the Vineyard to Provincetown. So you could do that, but you couldn't go, for example, from Provincetown to Boston, because those are in separate load zones. Nor could you go from somewhere in the southeast Mass zone that's an NSTAR service, or NSTAR on this map, now Eversource, NSTAR service territory to National Grid. This just shows a sample Schedule Z. All the names and addresses have been blacked out, but this is actually for a community shared solar project in Brewster, Massachusetts, and shows how the credits have been allocated to customers, each of the customers that are participating in the project. So you see here a very small percentage is being allocated to each of the total outputs, so between 2 and 4% in most cases. And they could allocate to as many accounts as they want, but at the end of the chart, all of this adds up to 100% of the credits being allocated to off-takers. I guess we've gotten a question about what about net metering for municipal light plants. Municipal light plants do not they don't comply with the same net metering tariff that investor-owned utilities do, so they can offer their own net metering programs, but these rules do not apply to municipal light plants. They do not participate in, they're not regulated the same way as the investor-owned utilities in this regard. So some of them do have net metering programs, but you have to talk to them about that for more details. And lastly here, just this quick example of a credit allocation. So this isn't a community shared solar project, but kind of gives you a sense of how it works for, it's really the same for all projects. It's just difference of how many off-takers you have. This is an actual project, a 2 megawatt project located on the East Hampton landfill. There's very little on-site load because there's no buildings or electric load on site. So the developer allocates net metering credits to the city of East Hampton's municipal electric accounts, and the city enters into a sale of net metering credit agreements with the developer. So East Hampton's receiving the dollar value credits on their bill, but they're only paying a fraction of $1 for those credits. And then the developer is being compensated at a rate higher than the wholesale price for that electricity, but less than the retail rate. So somewhere between those two that they've negotiated with the city of city of East Hampton. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emma Krause to talk a little bit more about some other aspects of community shared solar.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm just going to go through some of the resources that we have put on our website and have worked on in the past to help to any municipalities interested in pursuing community shared solar down the road. Here at DOER, I work as the Rooftop Solar Challenge Coordinator. Rooftop Solar Challenge is a federal grant that focuses on reducing soft costs for solar PV, things like permitting, financing, zoning, and interconnection. And we are currently in our second round. However, in our first round, one of the key things that we did was hire a set of consultants to develop a review and recommendations as well as an implementation guide for community shared solar. They analyzed the mechanics of the existing community shared solar projects in the state, and they assessed potential barriers. Both the review and recommendations as well as the guide are available on our website at this link. This might be a good time to use that camera option on the top right hand of your screen so you can access the link later on, and are there for your use and help. The guide goes through two main models for community shared solar that I'll go through later in this presentation. And the implementation guide in particular also provides quite a few contracting models and documents that will likely be helpful should you be interested in pursuing community shared solar. So I very much encourage you to take a look at both documents. So as I mentioned, the suggested models that are described in the guide are the participant ownership model and the public lease model. There's also the opportunity for an external entity or developer to come into a municipality and offer community shared solar as an option for its citizens. We don't document this in our guide, but it is fairly common practice across the state. And so we'll discuss that a little bit later too, and happy to answer questions on it that folks may have. The participant ownership model. So the reports recommend that a private entity be the system owner over a public entity, mainly so that mainly to make the tax credits possible that will come with the system. The private entity is formed by organizing participants to develop a community shared solar project, and these participants will form an LLC, which will then own the project. The private entity, this LLC, owns or leases the property on which the PV system will be installed, and it's the LLC that's really driving the process of getting the system up and running. The benefits of doing the participant ownership model are twofold. Because the individuals engaged in this project own it through the LLC, they receive federal and state tax credits, as well as the SREX that would be assigned to the project. They will also receive the net metering credits generated by the system. So you will get sort of financial benefit as well as the electric benefits of the project. An example of this in Massachusetts is the Harvard Solar Garden. It's a collective community-owned solar project where the subscribers are the shareholders. And as of early 2015, over 300 kilowatts of the anticipated capacity of over 500 kilowatts has been installed. There's 2 solar gardens in this project, and they are filled by both residents and businesses. The garden went live and on the grid in the summer of 2014. One thing we'll say about this project as well, it's a fantastic example of solar in Massachusetts. Elements of it are not replicable across the board. So if the participant ownership model is something that interests you, highly encourage you to go on Harvard's website. It's there at the bottom of our screen. Take a look at their project, and we'll provide contact information for the folks who worked on this program, this project later in the slides. Very much encourage you to reach out to them. They're very open to speaking with folks who are interested in community shared solar and talking about their process and what they learned from it. The second model outlined in these guides is the public lease model. In this, a public entity leases property to a private entity for the installation of community shared solar. And again, the reports recommend that a private entity be the system owner over a public entity. This is mainly, again, a tax credit issue. If a public entity were to receive the tax credits for this model, they wouldn't be. They would then be if they were to, own the project. They would then essentially be selling net metering credits to their residents, which I don't think would be quite appropriate with the ownership structure. So we recommend that, again, a private entity is the system owner and also operates the system. In this case, the municipality drives the process, and this is an opportunity where the municipality might be the anchor for the project, where they're taking 50% of the energy produced by the system, and the rest is given to perhaps residents of the town or other municipal buildings or such across the town through net metering. Participants benefit from the net metering credits generated by the system. So in this instance, while you don't get the benefit of the tax credits and the SRF, which would go to the private entity that owns the system, you will get the benefit of the energy and the net metering credits generated from the system. An example of this is the Brewster Community Solar Garden Cooperative in Brewster, Massachusetts. In this model, My Generation Energy organized, built, and now leases the Brewster Community Solar Garden to its members. The cooperative serves as an aggregator of that 346 kilowatt system. There's a 20-year lease agreement with the Brewster Community Solar Garden, so the system owner entity, and the cooperative members receive the benefits of net metering credits. You can learn more about the Brewster Solar Garden at the website on the right side of your screen. And we talk a lot about, in the implementation guide, again, the process behind the Brewster work, as well as the Harvard work. So that's a really great resource for understanding kind of how these different models can go. One thing to keep in mind is that these are very sort of basic models, and we recognize that community shared solar can come in all forms and fashions. So these are not the only two ownership models out there, and fully understand that, different models may be used in places, combinations of these models may be used in places, and encourage it. But wanted to give some sort of basic ideas of how to go about community shared solar in a successful way. So we've come to our second poll question now. And I'll turn it over to Charlie Peddle to read it out, and would ask everyone to take a moment to vote.
Okay, so the question is, if you're considering participating in putting together a shared model project, which model is of more interest to you? Participant ownership model, public lease, external entity, combination of both, or not sure, I need more information? Yeah.
So we're having slight technical difficulties, and so we'll get you this answer, hopefully, at the end. But for right now, we're going to keep on moving.
Okay.
So we're going to turn back over to Emma.
Okay. So one option we also wanted to make you aware of is a program that DOER is currently working on that might be of help for financing community shared solar. Where DOER is currently putting together a solar loan program and is hoping to be able to encourage community shared solar through that program, as well as residential direct ownership of solar in general. So I'm going to walk through the program and just talk about it at kind of a very high level, keeping in mind that this may be a financing opportunity for community shared solar. There are also, as you can see on the bottom of the slide, links to the program on our website and the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center's website. So should this interest you, please feel free to check out those links, learn more, and we have contact information there as well should you have questions. So the solar loan program will establish a loan product that is readily accessible for installers, customers, and lenders. It will be competitive with alternatives, so PPAs or lease options, cash for customers, and it will create an affordable solution and lender support to serve homeowners, moderate income owners, and small owner participants in community shared solar. So just taking a look at how you can be eligible for this loan program, you can either be a net metering participant in community shared solar, as Mike defined earlier in SRF 2, or you can be a net metering participant of 25 kW or less with an ownership position in the solar project. The key criteria to being able to be a borrower is that it's limited to participants with a direct ownership stake in the project or ownership through an LLC, a cooperative, a condo association, or other collaboration. So we're really trying to encourage individuals with a direct ownership stake. So that means that your project has to demonstrate that whatever participants are involved who are seeking a loan, they have a direct ownership stake in that project. The community shared solar participant doesn't need to necessarily be a homeowner, but they must meet the lender's underwriting criteria. So you could be a renter and participating in community shared solar in your community, in your load zone, but you have to ensure, to qualify for the project, that you meet the lender you're working with, you meet their underwriting criteria. So this is a very complex slide at first glance. This is basically the credit enhancement that will be available for the program. We're kind of documenting here the various options and how you qualify for each. I'm not going to go through each one. They're not of full importance for this conversation right now. But should this interest you, it is important to understand where you fit in this chart to understand how it will affect your financing. The piece that I think is most important for folks to understand is that in this program, in order to provide loans, we're going to be buying down the interest rate using the funding we've reserved for this program to buy down the interest rate to 3%. So you'll be guaranteed the low interest loan and ratcheting down that buy down over time of the program. The other key piece is on the far right hand of the screen, the moderate income loan support. If you qualify as moderate income in the program, you will have moderate income loan support available to you to further decrease loan, therefore reducing your cost per month of the loan. So that's a very sort of broad overview of how these credit enhancements will be applicable. Should you have additional information, or rather additional questions, please take a look at the web pages we put on the screen earlier. We're free to ask questions down the road as the loan program goes live. Just to have an understanding of how this program will affect the solar market, DOER has allocated $30 million to support the credit enhancement that I outlined on the previous slide. With modeling, the program is demonstrating that we'll be able to support over 5,000 loans. So that would be either for putting solar on a house that you're going to own, or solar as part of a community shared solar project. You can see the loan volume there, and we're hoping to take this funding and leverage it by about 4.5 times in order to support solar throughout the state. The Massachusetts Clean Energy Center is going to act as the central administrator for this loan program. In this role, the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center is going to qualify and enroll lenders, establish a website with public information, forms, documents, and lists of eligible lenders, installers, and loan offerings. They're going to establish and maintain a program database, provide the income verification for moderate income homeowners, provide DOER with reports on the loan program activity and recommendations for improvement. And they're also going to contract a fiscal agent who will register each loan, distribute an interest rate buy-down, distribute the moderate income loan support, among other roles. So may I ask, when is this program available? So we're laying out a time frame here to have an understanding of when you'll be able to take advantage of it. So early spring, MassDC and DOER are going to work to provide a lender agreement to the lending community for a review before finalizing it. So MassDC is then going to contract a web platform developer, a fiscal agent, and other program services. They'll begin building a program website and will begin soliciting lenders to the program and continue doing this even after the program is launched. We're going to outreach the program to installers and establish eligible installer lists, same time as around the lender work. And then we're going to start providing loans late spring or early summer of 2015. So should this interest you, please stay tuned as we continue with our process and continue to look at our website, the Clean Energy Center's website, for information and updates. And just a little bit of information now on other kind of community shared solar activities that are going on throughout the state. As I mentioned previously, we're now in the second round of Rooftop Solar Challenge. And in this round, we're working with other New England states in the region, Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire, to reduce soft costs, as well as learn best practices from them and share information. Under round 2, some community shared solar specific work includes developing outreach materials on the guidelines and recommendations I mentioned. This webinar is part of that, as well as some key work by municipal partners. Boston and Winchester are both municipal partners on the grant, and they're using the funding that they have to explore different types of community shared solar models. Winchester looking at a nonprofit model, Boston looking at a PPA model involving their local schools. And Cambridge, also a municipal partner, is using its funding to develop a guide to put solar arrays on condominiums. That guide should be coming in the next couple of months and will be available for use across the state. Looking forward to being able to provide that to municipalities. Condominiums also provide another option for community shared solar, so it should be of use. Some independent community shared solar activities across Massachusetts that we've seen. We mentioned the town of Harvard and Brewster's project. There's projects in Rehoboth, and there are others that are in development throughout the Commonwealth. Another project going on right now is the Center for Ecotechnology out in Western Mass has received a grant from the John Merck Fund to demonstrate, evaluate, and replicate community shared solar as an option to meet the state's renewable energy goals. The grant is called In Our Backyard, and it specifically targets the North Berkshire County residents and small businesses in that area. They're looking at potentially using community shared solar as a way to do a follow-up to the Solarize Massachusetts program. So as that grant comes down the road, DOAR is working with them and hoping to take whatever lessons learned from that grant that we can and make it available for folks interested in community shared solar across the state. And finally, some resources from the Green Communities Department that might be, division that might be of use. The Green Communities Division has offered owner's agent technical assistance in the past and will likely do so again in the spring. Part of this assistance are grants for assessment and development of public or private community shared solar systems. So should municipalities be interested in community shared solar and want to take a closer look, these grants may be a great opportunity for that. The Green Communities Regional Coordinators, whose information we put up earlier, are also great resources for understanding more about how to make something like this happen in a municipality. And as I mentioned previously, the Harvard Solar Garden folks are very open to chatting with anyone about their experiences and answering questions, and their email address is right there on the screen. So feel free to get in touch with them should you have questions about their process and how you might move forward. So as we said before, we put up some contact information. The RPS and Solar Carve-Out programs that Mike outlined earlier, link right there in the middle of the screen. Green Communities Resources, there's a link right there. Myself and Mike's contact information is on the screen, as well as our Renewable Energy Division Director, Dwayne Breger. So should you have questions outside of this webinar, I'm more than happy to discuss. And I believe we've recovered our lost poll question. So we will do that and then take your questions and answer as many as we can with the time we have left.
So actually, the poll question did not actually launch. So
okay.
So we need you to vote again. So we'll go back to that slide. And if you could just take another few seconds and indicate your choices on that. And then Charlie will announce the results.
With just about 70% of you voting out there, 32% are, say, participant ownership model, 12% public lease model, 12% external entity developer, 16% say a combination of A and B, and the last one, we have 28% not sure, need more information.
Okay. So as you mentioned, we will post a full Q&A written within a couple of weeks, but we do have some time here, so we're going to try and answer as many questions as we can. So we've got a question here that says, if a community shared project is greater than 25 kilowatts, does it still get full SREC?
Yes, it does. So yeah, you can have a much less. There's no size limitation on community shared solar apart from the 6 megawatt limit. That's for all SREC projects. There are some technical limitations to that because of the net metering rules. So in reality, it would be nearly impossible to actually meet the criteria with a public net metering facility. So almost every community shared solar project will be a private net metered project, which means they're capped at 2 megawatts AC by the Department of Public Utilities rules on net metering. So the effective limit is 2 megawatts for community shared solar, but the 25 kilowatts is not a limit.
Okay. On Schedule D, do you allocate the net that isn't used on site, or do you allocate the entire amount generated?
You're netting the net. You're allocating the net. So anything that you're using, if you have an on-site load, then anything that you use on site would go to that first, and then any excess generation that's left over at the end of the month that couldn't be applied to the consumption, kilowatt-hour consumption, will be created in the form of net metering credits, and those can be allocated.
Okay. Can I set up a new service at a site with on-site load and get net metering credits to allocate for most of the kilowatt hours?
Yes, you should be able to do that. You'd have to talk with the utility to see what they're doing, but generally speaking, yes, you can set up a new utility service at a site and then net meter to that site. That would be that's just kind of a virtual net meter project, though. That's not necessarily a community shared solar project.
Okay. Someone wants to know, where can I get sample documents for participant ownership, for the participant ownership model?
You can find those sample documents in the implementation guide that I had mentioned earlier that's on DOER's website. There's sample documents there for both the participant ownership model and the public lease model. So take a look. It would be on the renewables page, Rooftop Solar Challenge page, and then click Community Shared Solar, and you should be able to find them pretty quickly.
What are the state tax credits that are available for community shared solar?
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with any off the top of my head. I don't know that you would be able to take the residential solar tax credit, and I'm not sure. There's a property tax exemption for certain facilities. There's been some litigation on that with respect to virtually net metered facilities. I do not know how the ruling that was in the appellate tax board case would apply to this, apply to community shared solar. I don't know that you can take the residential solar tax credit. You may be able to if you're an owner. That's probably a better question for the Department of Revenue, and it may be a little unclear at this point in time.
So the tax credits that we're really referring to are federal?
Federal tax, yeah. There are federal tax credits. The investment tax credit would apply as long as a taxable entity owns the facility.
Okay. Someone's asking, can I have 3 off-takers for 1 megawatt of community shared solar project, or is it more like 27?
You cannot have 3 off-takers because that would violate the rule in our, well, if you want to qualify under the SREC regs, then it would violate the rules there, because you can only, if you have a 1 megawatt facility, you can have up to 2 people take 50%. So you could have one person taking 500 kilowatts, but the remainder of that the remaining 500 kilowatts would have to be broken up among participants that have 25 kilowatts or less. So that a participant is defined as an independent legal entity or individual. So you couldn't have a situation where there's one entity that has 20 accounts and you're giving them 20, you're allocating to those accounts in 25 kilowatt increments. You have to have 20 individual participants that are separate legal entities or separate individuals. So you really do need to have far more than 3 individuals or entities
one is asking if there are software systems available to administer these types of systems, community shared solar systems.
I'm not exactly sure what that's referring to. I mean, there are tracking. There are systems that track production remotely, but as far as administering I'm not sure exactly what you mean by administering systems, I guess.
Okay, so maybe we'll have to leave that one aside. We have someone asking about net metering caps for public entities. Is it combined for solar and wind projects, the net metering caps that are in place?
Yes, so it's for all net metering eligible technologies, so solar, wind, anaerobic digester, agricultural facilities, that's all under one cap. There are two particular caps the public entities should be aware of. One is the 5% overall cap for their utility service territory. So that applies to the entire utility service territory. And there's information, if you go to MassACA or MassACA.org, there's information on the current cap limits and where each utility territory is at with respect to its cap. One other thing I would say is public entities are capped at 10 megawatts. They can only host 10 megawatts facilities. They can get net metering credits for more than 10 megawatts facilities, but they can only act as the utility host customer for 10 megawatts.
Okay. There are a couple questions in here about net metering caps and when how constant they are and when will they change. That's all a service for the legislature.
Yeah, caps can only be changed if for some reason the utility has a new historical high and peak load that they serve, or if the legislature increases the cap. They're placed into statute, so
okay.
It's the only way they can be changed.
Someone wants to know, has anyone gotten an IRS ruling for the residential federal tax credit applying to off-site solar PV systems?
That's something that we're currently working on under Rooftop Solar Challenge 2 with the Clean Energy States Alliance. Massachusetts and Vermont are looking into making something to see whether we can get the private letter ruling and take advantage of that while the federal tax credit is in play. So stay tuned. It's a slow process, but it's something that we're doing our best to be able to hopefully make accessible for Massachusetts homeowners and developers.
Okay. So we'll probably take one more question, and then we will some of the ones that we need to consult with others or take a little bit more time with. We will post a full Q&A at the end. Actually, I think that most of them, several here are having to do with the net meter and cap question, which Mike just covered. So with that, I think we're going to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I guess it's almost this afternoon. And hopefully this was helpful and with new-ish topic. And we encourage you to join us on March 7th for another webinar, and keep an eye on our website for other updates that are coming down the line. Thank you.